Okay, so we are recording now. So formally, welcome everyone. It's so great to see you. The goal that we have with this Asian Supervisors Network is to get an opportunity for supervisors in Asia and the rest of the world to get together and get an opportunity to learn from each other. We have been meeting now for a couple of years, and this has been really a global meeting where we have Michelle and Genevieve from France, and they had to wake up really early to be here. So I really appreciate Michelle, Genevieve, both of you have been very supportive of this space, have done presentations in the past. So thank you for keep showing up to our meetings. And then we have some colleagues from that are in Asia, like Sravan from India. That's great to see you here today. I'm home from Vietnam. And I don't know, we have a couple of more people I'm seeing here in the list that have not turned on their cameras yet. And then we have people from Australia, like Frederick, Monica, Pauline. I don't know if I am missing anybody. And then from the US, we have Inga and I who live in the west side, the West Coast, and Deborah who lives in Canada in the East Coast. But today I am in Buenos Aires visiting my family. So it's midnight. So I kept telling my parents, please remind me that I talk to the spirit tonight. Okay, I cannot miss it. So it's great being here today, and particularly because Deborah accepted to do this presentation. And Deborah, why don't you introduce yourself and share with people what you would like people to know about you? And as we were talking about this session, we want to do it interactive. So even though she's going to be presenting, we can all share our experiences and learn from each other. So I'm going to put you in the spotlight for everyone so we can get to see you bigger.
Beautiful, thank you. And I do have, I'm probably going to share my screen at some point shortly, but I thought as we come together into this space, now I see myself really big. Let me change my view. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, for the
recording,
for the recording is pretty good, but everybody you can manage how you see it in the view in the top. You can choose, you can see speakers or gallery, so you can choose how to see what you're seeing.
That was super interesting because usually I hide my view and then I was staring at my big face. So thank you so much for having me. I maybe wanted to start with a short grounding exercise if we could. I'm told that people enjoy that when I do that. And so I'd love to share that part of me with you before I tell you a little bit more about myself and before we enter into this discussion space. So this is one that you can do standing or seated, camera on or off. And we're gonna just take a minute to settle into our bodies. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And we're gonna focus our breath in 3 distinct ways. The first way is we're going to think about lengthening our body. Feeling your feet on the floor, straightening your spine, relax your shoulders, and feel your body lengthen and straighten, connecting you deep into the ground and up into the sky. And this breath is a move towards dignity and self-worth. Our next breath is in width, thinking about the broadening of your body, claiming your space in the world, expanding to the sides to include the parts of yourself that perhaps you've neglected or forgotten. And this width is a move toward inclusion and wholeness. And for the third breath, think about your life stretching far into the past and into the future. Feel the generations of ancestors, all of our ancestors who stand behind you with their hands on your back, resourcing you with courage and love. And in front of you are all the lives that you will touch and that you will make better. And this is a move towards ancestry and towards legacy. And thinking of this simple practice in lengthening, broadening, and deepening, like putting air back into your balloon, filling and expanding your soul with dignity, wholeness, and connection to your past and to your future. And whenever you're ready, I will share my screen, do a bit of an introduction. Oops. You should be seeing full screen now. Am I correct?
Yes, yes, we can see it well.
Beautiful, thank you. And I'll just adjust mine so I can see everyone. Fantastic. So thank you for coming into the space with me with breath. Just a little bit about myself, and whenever I introduce myself, I try to think about what's important for you to know. And I think on this front, it's a couple of things. So I've been a coach for 17 years. I'm on roster for, I think we'll say 3 at this moment, global digital coaching leaders. I have been trained as mentor coach. I'm twice trained, once before Damien and now with Damien as a coaching supervisor. I'm an ADHD coach trained, and I'm also a career development practitioner. It's been a couple of years now that I've been researching inclusion in coaching, and specifically now in the last couple of years, neurodiversity has really caught my attention. And so in terms of the clients that I do serve in both coaching and supervision, about 90% of my clients would fall into a category that I would call neurodiverse. And I think there's always some debate as to what does that mean. So presumably many of you are curious to kind of unpack that, and we will do that this evening. But what this really is more of a conversation where we can really start to unpack that. What does it mean to us as supervisors? So what else do I want to say? What else do I want to say? I want to say that my own story with respect to neurodiversity is not fully written yet. And so I wanted to share that there are some complexities, socioeconomic, political complexities, medical complexities, where it comes to diagnosis. And so my story is not fully written, but I will share with you that I fit a profile called a highly sensitive person. I think some people might use a short form of empath, but it's, I would say, a little bit more complex than that. And I fit the bill for about 50% of adult female autistic traits. I don't have a formal diagnosis, and I would consider myself an ally with humility and curiosity. I also consider myself a person with a pretty interesting and fine-tuned brain. So What I'd love to know from folks right up front is just, a couple of folks, whatever you want to say, whether you want to type it into chat or say out loud, just what is your interest in neurodiversity? And that's even before we start to really define. Frederick, I see your hand, and I'm also putting a quote up here. Go ahead.
Well, my interest is I was diagnosed with dyslexia 3 years ago. And through studying this year with Damien, and I've also learned much more about myself and how I can be a curse, but how it can be also a gift. And especially in coaching supervision. I'm still juggling at this stage between how to manage it and how to use it more efficiently in coaching supervision.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think that's part of the conversation for this evening. Monica, hi.
I'm really interested in this because I've actually done a lot of reading, and we've actually had some speakers talk about this already, but I still feel I'm just beginning to understand. I work a lot with really smart coaches in the tech industry, where I think my sense tells me is that most of them are on some sort of a spectrum. And also, so I'm really interested to know more how I can work really well with them, but also just yesterday, I have one of my coaches has got a very challenging team member whom she's trying to manage, who, in my humble opinion, is clearly showing all the signs of being neurodiverse. And she just is completely out of her depth and doesn't know how to deal with it. So, I guess for me, it's around having some more, not necessarily, it is understanding, but tools really of very practical as to how to help people manage this well in the workplace.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, this is showing up a lot.
Yeah.
And I can tell you my clients find me. And yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Other folks, anybody else who would like to share your interests? So as you're considering that, I want to read you this quote. So I went, I was saying to Damien, my process for putting this talk together was kind of a roundabout creative process. And so I went for a long walk with a dear old friend who has ADHD, not a coach. And as I was walking and talking with her, I live not far from the lake here, and we were walking along the lake, and I was talking to her about the work that I'm doing and about this talk. And she said, just literally, she said this completely unprompted. She said, it's my perspective, the ADHD perspective, and it exists only in the here and now. And it so beautifully captured this idea for me, which I feel like, Frederica is in my cohort with Damien. We're just graduating. And there's a third person in our cohort who also has a diagnosis. And it's kind of interesting to me, the marriage, the idea of us as supervisors being in the here and now, and that there's something specific that stood out to my friend, my longtime friend who has ADHD, about her perspective that here and now is all that she lives. And so I just kind of wanted to bring that interesting thing forward before we even started on, sort of some defining. So as we move forward today, really what I wanted to do is have a conversation about our lived experiences. So how does neurodiversity relate to our identity? And then how does it carry through at the intersection of coaching supervision? The folks that we are in supervision, either supervisor, supervisee, or client. And then what then is our perspective from neuroidentity? So that still might sound a little mysterious. I promise I'll put a little bit more structure around it before we wander into the wild. But this is kind of what interested me. Like if you did a Google search right now or a Google Scholar search on neurodiversity and coaching supervision, I'll tell you, because I did it, you would get 0 responses that are on topic. And so, you know, when I asked myself, you know, what's the conversation that I want to have? It's let's create our own, like that we're starting here at ground zero. So let's talk about it. What's the conversation that we really want to have? Who are we? What is our neuroidentity? How does that manifest as supervisor, supervisee, and as client? And so what I thought I'd do is present you with 3 questions and a couple of case studies. And I want to say broad case studies where I'll just kind of bring some examples in that might allow us to start thinking. But before we do that, you know, I appreciate Jean Alvear is here, and we have a community of practice for neurodiversity starting in the Americas Supervision, Coaching Supervision Network. And one of the things that we had some interesting discussion on was how do we define that? And in the end, we didn't define it. We said we're going to have another conversation about it. So I thought that here today, we might start with like something really broad. So really broadly speaking, when folks are referring to neurodiversity, we're talking about the fact that no 2 human brains are alike. Like that's like ground zero. And even just thinking about that idea of my brain is different than your brain is different than anybody you will ever meet. So that I think is something to, pardon the pun, to get your head around, the fact that your head is different than everybody else's head. Our brains are different, and yet there is a subset of brains that think and learn and interact and perceive the world differently, that have been given medical diagnosis or labels. And so when we think of neurodiversity, we're talking about really the universe of brains and how we get along in this world. But we're also talking about a subset of brains that I think people are probably commonly thinking of. So within this subset, there is ADHD, and that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. ADHD would have been known as ADD. Now it is one label and medical diagnosis and different presentations under that. And one of the things that I'm really starting to understand here is that these terminologies and what's encompassed and what isn't changes over time. So if we look at here, autism spectrum conditions, so this comes from a source called Neurodiversity Week, and I believe that's a US site. There also is some different terminology depending on where you are. So some might know autism as autism spectrum disorder, ASD. Those of you, probably if you've worked with folks in the business world for a long time, you might know some folks that might identify as Asperger's. And in the last incarnation of the diagnostic manual, Asperger's was subsumed under autism. And so that presents, I think, its own set of social issues. And then we have a couple of learning disabilities here, dyslexia. Dyslexia impacts literacy. dysgraphia, which impacts handwriting, dyspraxia, which impacts physical coordination or balance, and dyscalculia, which impacts numeracy. And then the final one that kind of falls under this subset is Tourette's syndrome. This is an impact to the nervous system, or you might know this as tics. So I'm wondering, before we move forward, if there's, and I'm also want to check the chat, how neurodiversity impacts supervision. Yes. And that's from Sriban, yeah. And that's really the discussion that we're wanting to have here. So before we move forward, I'm wondering if we can in some way embrace this definition of neurodiversity, or whether you have questions about that before we move forward. Okay, so this is really what it comes down to. So many of you know the seven-eyed coaching supervision model. That's Hawkins and Shohat. And then we come to this broad question. So what is at the intersection? If we say that neurodiversity is this and it's this, how does that all intersect with identity, our own identities, and coaching supervision? And so the first thing I want to put up is the seven-eyed model, right? This is Hawkins and Shohat. Then if we overlay neurodiversity on it, there's three aspects that I wanted to bring forward. The first one is the supervisor, and if we call this neuro identity, so this is what is your experience and perspective where it comes to having a diverse brain. The second thing would be the supervisee's neuro identity. And then we have, by extension, the client's neuro identity. And I wanted to have a conversation about this. I'm wondering, Damien, what do you think? Do we have enough people to do breakout rooms, eh? Yeah.
Yes,
so
we're 12 here, so we can have 3 groups of 4 or 4 groups of 3.
Yeah. So let me just, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the chat 3 questions.
Do you want to be one of the groups, Deborah?
Do I? Can I bounce around? Yes, I'll be in one of the groups. And just give me a minute. I'm having some trouble copying and pasting the questions. Let me read the questions aloud.
Do you want me to read them for you when you read them?
Well, in typical Deborah fashion, they're not short questions. So just give me a second here. Let me do this.
Take your time.
I thought I had copied them. There we go. Okay. There we go. There we go. So the questions are, how does your neuro identity, how does your own, the way that you operate in the world with your brain, how does it manifest as coaching supervisor? How does your supervisee's neuro identity manifest in coaching supervision? And how does the supervisee's client, how does their neuro identity manifest in coaching supervision? And I'm wondering if it would be useful before we go to breakouts if I gave a couple of anecdotes that might relate to the questions. Would that be helpful?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So, so this is a quote from my colleague, who is a supervisor who is diagnosed as dyslexic. And I asked her sort of the very same question: how does your identity manifest as a coaching supervisor? And she says, dyslexia has proven to be such a gift, as it's my superpower in coaching and coach supervision. The gift of using presence, awareness, and really listening to the body's wisdom inside and out, not getting caught up on how to pronounce the right word correctly and just lead from within, has been a profound gift. And she says the parallels come and the deep curiosity to lean into the present moment just the way it is. So that is how her neuroidentity as a person with dyslexia shows up in coaching supervision. I want to talk a minute, an example of a supervisee. So this is a coach who has ADHD. And the case she brought to me, and I speak this with her permission, she was talking about her way of communicating. So she had done a psychometric assessment, and she says, I really need to improve my communication. And I knew that this coach had ADHD. This was part of the system of our supervision. And I asked her one simple question. I asked her, how does her ADHD relate to her ability to communicate? And that was the breakthrough moment for her. That was where she realized that her best it wasn't a matter of she doesn't know how to communicate or that she doesn't communicate well. It was a matter of noticing her body and keeping track of her body when she communicates. So no leadership principle book ever, no psychometric assessment or any thing that went with it would ever recommend that someone sits on their hands to communicate better. But this is what this human being needed. And the breakthrough in coaching supervision was in her recognizing the connection between her communication and her need to look after her body in communication. So that's how does the supervisee's neuroidentity manifest. That would be an example. And then the final example is client neuroidentity. And I'll share with you a case where a supervisee, their case was was rather centered around the client's, their sense that the client was disengaged from the session, as evidenced by off-camera behavior. So having the camera off during the session. And the breakthrough moment for this supervisee was asking that supervisee, what were they assuming about engagement and camera and being on camera? And that was a really powerful moment when we brought in the possibility that the client who was felt to be disengaged was off camera. And I can see we have 3 folks off camera today. And so leaving space for different people to participate in different ways, in ways that might resonate with them. And what are we assuming as part of that communication? So I'm hoping that that those couple of examples give you some sort of traction from which to have a discussion on the 3 questions. Is that all making sense now?
So how long, Deborah, do you want to have the discussion groups?
I think we'd be good to go 10 or 12 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we could go that, and then we'll do a debrief after that. Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to be sending people right now. So maybe choose one person to take some notes, so when we come back, somebody can report. Would you like that, Deborah? Or not
Yes,
necessarily?
yes.
Okay, because this is
Yeah, okay, yes, thank you. Process. All right.
Talking about different styles.
So
This is like I'm a structure, but maybe it's not necessary here.
it's funny, I'm much more process oriented at like 4 p.m. So yes, so we should have a process. We'll have a couple of breakout groups. And I think I would just actually like to have a bigger conversation when we come back. Just kind of giving you some traction is to have some one-to-one or smaller group conversations.
Okay, great. So we'll see you back in 12 minutes. So Travan, you asked not to be in a group, so put you by yourself.
Oh, is that?
And so if we don't know what the gift is, how can we use it for ourselves, but also for others?
We come back muted. Feel free to unmute yourself. So I joined with Frederica and Monica. We had a couple of folks that didn't join into the breakout room. So I'd love it if we could just kind of share the conversation about what came up for you. What were your curiosities? I know that Monica had sort of an interesting curiosity. I'm curious to hear.
Yeah, my curiosity is around all these labels that worry me a lot. And that's my own stuff. And I really recognize that having a label on something can be incredibly useful for many people. But I also wonder whether we're not perhaps putting too many labels on things, because it can be very negative for some people. And I'm hearing these labels everywhere. I mean, just wherever I hear, oh, it's got ADHD, or it's got this, it's got that. I think, really? I'm sure they have. But how useful is that? I don't know. I
think one of the things that I found interesting about that, so when Monica brought that up, Frederica was talking about how useful it has been for her. And I'll tell you what I hear on the client side. So now we have diagnosis, we have, so what is the purpose of diagnosis? Is to get to have some sort of adjustment in your life. Understanding an adjustment, very often that comes with medication. And, you know, I can tell you from my client perspective and what I know about neurodiversity in the workplace, disclosure is very often not safe for our clients in the workplace. And so that presents for us as coaches and then potentially as supervisors a bit of a conundrum where we and this comes up with many of my clients are either diagnosed or undiagnosed, certainly not disclosed at work. And so they're coming to me very often for because it's very hard on them to like this idea of masking. So I know who I am, I know what I need, and it's dangerous to in some ways to disclose at work. So there's that tension there as well with the labels because there's so much miseducation out there for sure. Frederic?
One of the skills on linking that is now on is dyslexic thinking. So I start to say, instead of saying I'm dyslexic, I say I've got dyslexic thinking.
Interesting.
Maybe there's a way to reword the labels or at least what it means to the people that are diagnosed with those.
Well, and I think
identified, not diagnosed. Sorry.
There's in no small measure, there's perhaps some ethical obligations maybe that we have as coaches when we're coaching executives. So I lay that out there as well. I'm wondering, other folks. Monica. Okay. What were the other groups?
Actually, I shared my experience that I worked with a lot of clients with neurodiversity. I actually had a privilege to work in an organization that it's not hidden. Sometimes because, you know, owners or VIPs in these organizations are neurodiverse, and there is the acceptance to it. However, I have never worked with a coach who disclosed this about themselves, and as well with like thinking about the supervision. So we were thinking about this neuro identity, what it really means. We were trying to, with Michelle and Simchu, or think like, is it like a personality and my imprint of how I show up as a supervisor, or is it something different? Because neuro identity, as you said, Deborah, at the beginning, everybody got different brain, and we all think differently. So it doesn't have to mean that I am ADHD or from the spectrum that I get diagnosis, but it means that there's something unique about my thinking. So how much does it relate to personality? That was something we were thinking about, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I love that question or idea, because when you think about it, we don't all walk around with labels, right? And when you meet somebody who operates in the world differently than you do, is that their personality? Is it a matter of their neurobiology? You know, what is that you're interacting with? Yeah, I think that's a really valid question. I'm not even sure neuroidentity is a real term, but it seemed like the term that we wanted to have, that I wanted to create this conversation around. I'm wondering, we haven't heard from Michelle or Jean-Elvire or a couple other folks.
Well, I'll jump in for our group.
Yeah.
Jean-Elvire and Hung were in my group here. And it might pick up a little bit on what was just said a moment ago. We weren't necessarily talking about personality, but what those things in our neuroidentity, what were those things that may then present in our supervision, so to speak. And we had a few things coming up. And as we started to roll up our conversation and thought about it, there were three very different things that were presenting from three different people in the group. And Jean-Elvire made it very clear toward the end, these are all the gifts that we bring to supervision, this difference in our neuroidentity. And one was more around the rational way of thinking and the way that particular person Hung approaches things. And so that kind of impacts how they present in their supervision. And Jean-Elvire was talking about being a very feeling person and processes everything in the body. And so that's likely to show up given that tendency in how they operate. And for me, it was all around connection. And so whether or not these things are personality type or we consider them to be part of our neuroidentity, they're really present for the three of us. Just interesting that all three of us describe something distinctly different, and we bring distinctly different gifts to supervision. And I think that's important and that's notable. And important in particular because whether you're working with someone who presents as neurodiverse or not, it's important that we can leverage whatever those gifts are, at least in my view, that we can leverage that gift regardless of who it is we're interacting with. And I think that's an important point for all of us.
Yes, thank you, Pauline.
In fact, what we bring in the room we have a culture, we have a personality, we have a lot of cognitive bias, we have a lot of beliefs, which are, most of them are completely wrong. It's quite complex to try to just sort all that mess in order to answer the question, what's really going on? What is really going on? So we, and even the theoretical frameworks that we use are not neutral. There is an example of, I know people who have chosen to go into neuroscience as a model because they hate psychoanalysis and they don't want to know about themselves. So you see, yeah, I see Damien smiling. Probably you know people like that. So it's just that it's awfully complex, your questions.
They are, indeed, indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we have only 3 minutes to start wrapping up. But tell us, Deborah, next time we need to do part A and part B, because it seems that this is just the beginning of a conversation. And I agree that there is a lot to explore and discuss and go further. So we may want to invite you to come back and keep this conversation. I think that, I don't know if you would like to do that, to have a second part later, and maybe with to continue.
I absolutely would. I absolutely, 100%. I wanted to share, if I could, and
we also invited Deborah to do a similar presentation for the Americas Coaching Supervision Network next month. So for people who can make it, I know in Australia it's very difficult, but because it's 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. But if you're available, it's always the third Monday of July. I think it's 17th, if I am not wrong.
It is.
At 8 a.m. And they were going to be doing a session. It may be similar to this, but not completely the same. So you may join us and continue the conversation in that space. But we may continue this, because I do believe it's important for us to distinguish and recognize some of these behaviors that can help us to be more effective supervisors. If coaches don't see it, this is like what I think it's important before we finish today to say, when there are issues about neurodiversity that there are, and the coach is blind to that, they are not seeing it, we as supervisors may want to bring this to the attention to the coaches working with their clients. And this neurodiversity can come from ourselves as supervisor, the coach, or the clients. So it's complex where this is coming from.
Yeah.
Can I offer something? Because I was sharing this, that, and maybe Deborah, that could be something we can explore further next time, that I noticed 2 behaviors in coaches who work with neurodiverse clients as a supervisor. One is if they don't know that something is happening or that the client has a little bit different way of thinking, there is a lot of assumptions going on. And the second, when they heard, like, okay, I'm ADHD, as a client declare something, that I'm now neurodiverse or I'm from autistic spectrum, there is fear of doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So it's like there are very interesting paths. So if we could next time maybe explore it, especially this fear of doing something wrong, and how to address it, because that's something which we going to see more and more, I believe.
Yeah, I agree, Inga. I would love to expand the conversation in any way that you feel. And I want to leave this thought because it really does kind of lead into that. Am I still sharing my screen, by the way? No, I'm not. Okay. So I wasn't sure whether or not I was. This is the thought that I wanted to leave you with, and I'll read it out loud. And yet, any discussion about neurodiversity should begin with an emphasis on its universality, which we did this evening, balanced with the existence and experiences of neuro-identity groups that have faced and continue to face marginalization and oppression in workplaces and societies. We may all, as humans, have our own unique brains, but that does not mean that the practical experiences of people who have neurotypical brains are comparable to those in other neuroidentity groups. And that kind of gets to ideas around disclosure, ideas around socio-political and economic barriers that folks with diagnosis might face. So I'd love to expand the conversation. I wanted to really leave with, since we talked about this big, beautiful universe of brains, I also wanted to kind of recognize the subset of brains. And I'm so, so grateful for being able to have this conversation and to be able to expand it in any way that we can.
Thank you, Deborah, for preparing this. I know you put some love and care in getting ready for today, so thank you for that. And I want to thank everyone for participating and being here today. And this is to be continued. It's not the conversation. We have the America's Coaching Supervision Network. We also have a community of practice that Deborah started, and General Beat also, I heard, participated. I don't know if anybody else in this call was there. Frederick, I don't know if anybody else was at the meeting. And do you want to let people know also when is the next meeting? Is the second Monday, Monday the 10th?
Yes, I do.
Is it ICF's community of practice, or is it something
America's
separate?
America's
I
Coaching
think that the
Supervision
next
Network,
one
community of
is
practice.
July the 10th.
Thank you. July the 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
And I think we just posted it in the America's Coaching Supervision community of practice in the LinkedIn group, and it'll also be in the newsletter.
And also there is a book club, and Janelle Beer and Inga facilitate that book club. So do you want to let people know about that before we finish?
Yes, we always welcome. Usually this is the last Monday of the month. We are reading now the book Coaching Supervision Voices from America, and next session we've got on July 31st at 9 a.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Central European time. So it's good for our colleagues from Europe as well. And we're going to read chapter 10 about internal coaching supervision. So, and we're going to have Theodora Fitzsimmons with us as co-author of this chapter to explore the topic a little bit. So, and as well, everything we post usually on America's Coaching Supervision Network on LinkedIn. So if you want to find the details, please connect with us. And as well, if you don't read the chapter, but you still want to talk with coaches and supervisors about whatever topic is explored, please join in. Yeah, it's just reading is encouraged, but it's not mandatory. We've always having interesting conversations.
Great. Thank you for doing that. Well, thanks everybody. Have a good day, night, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you, Deborah, for staying till late. Like me, you know, it's a little bit of a and for Michelle and Genevieve to wake up so early, you know, to be here. So we'll see you in the next activities in the next few weeks. Okay, everybody, take care.
Thank you all.
Bye. It was great seeing you. Great you're here today.
Okay.
Thank you.
And seeing Joe, that was great.
Bye.
Great to
Night,
see you.
everyone.
And thanks, Damien.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you, Damien.
Thanks everybody. So let me stop recording. Just a sec.